cycles of violence, increasing the harm that has happened. And then on the other hand, I've also been a fairly active person in a variety of different social movements, so climate movements, racial justice movements, some anti-poverty campaigns, a variety of different environmental pipeline and things related movements. And so in that world, we actually try to amass power in a collective sense and to force some kind of action or the omission or the stopping of some kind of action. And so, those things are in tension somewhat. The activist in me and the peace builder in me. So it's from that place that I'm happy to kind of lead a session. This is going to be kind of a collective journey. I have some ideas that I'm hoping will more than anything prompt you to think and contribute to your own reflection. And while with 40-something people, it'll be hard to have a real conversation, I do hope that we'll hear more than just my voice and gain some of those perspectives. And if you notice you've got a thought, an idea that's really different, please bring it into the space, either raising your hand or adding it to the chat box. If you're distracted by the chat box, you can close that. And I will be kind of tracking and monitoring, as well as Paula and Shahar. And so if we see any questions come there, either in the moment, if they seem relevant, or at one of our discussion points, we'll address those questions. Let's see if there's anything else to start us off. I think that's it. So welcome, everyone. I guess I'd like to do one thing that's to start us off a little more interactive. If you don't mind typing into the chat box where physically you are right now. I always get I have a fascination about how we're able to be in one place while scattered all over the world. It gives me, it tickles me quite a bit to see it. So yeah, I'm seeing right now, we've got the US and UK, Oregon, Colorado, Germany, warme Grüße. Yep, we've got Kinetic. Okay, so we got a good amount from the US, Netherlands, Sweden. Okay, more Germany, Spain. Bienvenidos. UK, great. Okay. Okay, Aotearoa. Olympia, beautiful. Ohio, okay. Right, so welcome from all over, and feel free to keep putting that in there. So I'd like to get us started by just acknowledging with these people here scattered over a good amount of Western Europe and Northern America, with a dabbling beyond that as well. Acknowledging where we are today at this point in time as a global community. So we'll be talking about force and care, and there seems to be a whole lot of force happening out there in the world. And it wouldn't surprise me if we're holding a great deal of grief, of pain, of fear about what is happening around us. And unfortunately, there are so many different issues and events happening that if I were to start listing them, I think I'd fear being biased about just the ones that are most up and alive for me and may not be touching all of you. So I want to recognize that that's where we are right now. In this session, we're holding that and bringing it in. And actually, that's a good thing for us to have on our minds as we move through this session. I really want us to wrestle with what does force and care mean in a world like we have today. So with that, I want to introduce a bit of a schematic that I learned from a woman named Fania Davis. Some of you may be familiar with Fania Davis. More likely, you're familiar with Angela Davis, who was a member of the Black Panthers and active in the civil rights movement. Fania was her sister, and Fania is very well known in the restorative justice community. She was the founder of Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, a number of the Bay Area restorative justice efforts, which have provided leadership and modeled for us around the world. And Fania Davis, in one of her books, highlights this duality of the warrior and the healer, saying that we all hold, to some extent, the warrior, which for her was in reference to the like the Black Panthers, to her sister, to her activism, which marched and protested, which at times carried arms, and the healer, which was her reference to the restorative justice practitioner, the mother in her family, the caretaker, the nurturer, the ones that brought people together, oftentimes in circle, to talk about harm and to find ways to move forward. And so what I would like to do is have you go into breakout groups of 3. And in your breakout groups of 3, you'll have 10 minutes to share your own sense of your warrior and your healer in this moment now. Who is that warrior in you? What are they wanting, that warrior? What are they striving for? What do they do or want to be doing in times like this? And who's the healer in you? Similarly, what is the healer in you looking to do? What do they aspire to? What are they doing already or want to be doing? Okay, and I encourage you to figure out how to allocate your time so everyone has a chance to share. If you want to first do warriors around for all 3 people, you can do that. If you want to do warrior and healer for each person, just kind of keep conscious of time so that everyone has a chance to participate. So while this is the breakout groups start thinking about who the warrior and the healer in you is, and you'll be invited into a breakout group. Those I'll send those questions out in a chat to you, and if you're not able to join a breakout room, that's fine as well. But I hope you will if you can.
Just to let you know, if you don't want to take part in a breakout room, if you're in a car driving or something like this, please rename yourself or send me a chat by using 2 dashes in front of your name. So we will know not to put you in a breakout room. Some wrote in the chat, I will rename you myself.
Shahar?
Yes.
For those who don't want to be in a breakout room, should we assign them to
you can leave them in the main room.
Okay. So I don't know how to, well, so if you don't want to go into a breakout room, you can just ignore the invitation, because I have placed everyone in the room. So I see some people indicating they don't want. So just ignore the invitation, please.
And if you're in a room by yourself, just please wait 1 or 2 minutes. Paula will take care of you.
Tarek, are you ready for me to
Yes.
open the rooms?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
great.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm opening the rooms.
So I guess the rest of us here can take a bit of a break. Do we have a timer?
Lorraine, just to make sure I don't see two dashes next to your name, would you like to be placed in a breakout room? Okay, I'll take care of Lorraine.
Hi, Goni.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hi and thank you and missing you all and excited to be hugging you soon. I'm going to be partly listening. I'm with my whole family now. So I'm around and I really am so happy that this is recorded because only from the beginning I was like, oh my God, just want to listen to it when I have more spaciousness. So thank you, Tarek. Thank you so much. Paula, thank you so much for coming here to support. I'm also super excited. We are going to hug soon. When I said all you, I meant all of you, just to make it clear. Yeah. So I'll let you have a small break and I'm going to go back to the family here, but I just wanted to say hi.
Hi, Goni, thank you.
Paula,
Paula, I've went to all the breakout rooms. It looks good now.
Okay. Yeah, I've been moving some people as you have. So I think everybody has somebody.
Great.
Great. And I
Then
put 60 seconds warning before automatically closing.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm heading off and I will be back in 45 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be back in 4 minutes.
Okay. Hi, Maud. Did you just join?
Yes, I was having technical difficulties.
Okay. So folks are in a breakout room
Okay.
for another 4.5 minutes or so, 5
Okay.
minutes. They're exploring the question. Let me see if I find the question. Share about the warrior and the healer in you. What does that part of you do, think, feel, and wish to do? Would you like me to put you in a breakout room?
I'll wait. I don't want
You'll wait? Okay.
anybody, but I'll be here when everybody gets back.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Paula.
Welcome.
Thanks. We're in a breakout.
Hi, everyone. Those of you who came back from the breakout room, we're about to close all the rooms.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Right. I'd love to hear if there are 2 or 3 comments on how that activity went for you. Please don't share what the other person had said, unless you are already aware that they are okay with that, but rather share how it was for you if you have anything to share.
Okay, I'll start. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
First, Tarek, where are you? Where are you?
I'm in an office building in Washington, D.C.
Oh, Washington, D.C. Okay, I'm in San Diego. Hi, hi.
Hi.
And I shared that this little experience I had. Well, I'm actually a NVC trainer too in San Diego. I've been doing this a long time too. I love NVC. And anyway, but I had this interesting experience last weekend. I was about like being able to shift from my warrior frustration, like underneath when I get into a warrior place, it's usually that when I feel powerless against something. That's the core thing underneath. When I'm in warrior mode, somehow I'm feeling powerless, and so then I have to act powerfully, with force or something, because underneath I'm just really feeling powerless. But okay, so last week, anyways, I was at an outdoor park dance, and I can dance. I'm pretty good at dancing. I'm comfortable with dancing. And some guy randomly came up to me to dance, and he obviously doesn't really know how to this couples dance, and he's twirling me around, and it's sort of hurting my hand, and um, and then he's saying these kind of awkward things, like, oh yeah, baby, or something. I don't know. And I just felt really uncomfortable, like, get me away from this guy. And then I saw the woman that he was with taking video of us dancing. And I realized in that moment, and I confirmed it with her later, that he's got Alzheimer's. But while I was dancing with him and I saw her, I just put it together in my head that, oh, because he was older. And I shifted completely my feeling state. And then I wanted to dance with him, and I loved dancing with him, and I loved that he was doing the best he could. It was such a shift, instant shift like that. And then I thought, wow, if I could just look at everybody that way, that we're all just doing the best we can, and we're all innocent, we're all walking wounded in some way or whatever, and have that instant shift, because it was just really, really dramatic for me that day. I just wanted to share that.
Well, I want to give a pause just there to take that in. I think that really highlights a key idea in this. And both things you said, both the idea that powerlessness leads to a sense of wanting to be the warrior, and then care and connection leading you to be the healer in that dancing scenario. Yeah.
Thank you for so getting it. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that basically is the workshop. I think we can finish now. Thanks, everyone. Nice. All right. I see Janie. You've got your hands up, and then Magdalene, and then we'll move on. Janie.
I want to say that I find it really helpful that warrior, healer, I've never really thought of those 2 components. It seems to me really what NVC is all about. It sort of helps me to see that when I'm being an activist, for instance, I'm a zero waste activist in our local area, that actually it's both being the warrior and being the healer at the same time in every part, in interactions with people in power, in looking after the natural world, and in my other particular activism, which is peace trolling, trying to bring NVC into social media and sort of start that shift so that actually more and more people bring healing into social media. I see it too as being warrior and healer. So I'm just celebrating this new understanding.
Great. And I'm going to put in a link here. So if you want to read more from Fania Davis's own words, the little book on race and restorative justice is a very easy, quick read. Give you a dive into RJ and racial justice and that particular idea of the warrior and the healer. Thanks so much. Magdalene?
Yes, hi. This experience was an aha experience for me because I never thought of thinking of warrior versus healer. And for me, right at this period of my life, healer is more prevalent as an NVC facilitator and a psychotherapist. And I used to be a warrior during my youth, both within the family and outside the family. And but for me, they're not two opposite things. I am a healer because I'm a warrior. But recently, I consciously bring up the warrior as well, because I have realized I had suppressed it. So it was a good experience to be in that breakout room.
So what I want to magnify from what you said, Magdalene, is that you're a warrior because you're a healer, and you're a healer because you're a warrior, and very much there is an intertwined connection. How can we truly heal if the warrior doesn't allow for the kind of safety and freedom that some circumstances of harm require? And how can we be a warrior without a healer that's there to be able to purify the healer, focus, nurture the warrior? The two are very interconnected. Thank you. I see one more hand with Colleen. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a quick comment that it seems to me that when I'm in the warrior mode that's when I sense a power imbalance, and the healer is when I see how to bring it into power with.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So maybe to tag onto that, Colleen spoke about power with. So if you're not familiar, there's both an NVC and other models, we talk about having power over a typical domination paradigm. And oftentimes the warrior is called upon when there's a power over dynamic that needs to be rectified. So the warrior will create a power up so that you can have shared power, at which point power with allows for the healer to come forward, the one that connects and brings together. And so it's at a point of shared power, of more equalized power, that you can have healing when there's a disequilibrium in power. Oftentimes you need the warrior to bring them into equilibrium. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm glad you enjoyed it, those who did. I do want you to think now about integrating your own warrior and healer. So I'm going to ask, we're going to do like a 1 to 2 minute grounding visualization kind of activity. So I ask that you turn off your cameras, get yourselves comfortable, settled into wherever you are. And I want you to take what you spoke about as your own healer and warrior in the breakout groups. And you may have thought about particular stories. You may have thought about like parts of your personality, parts of your identity, parts of your upbringing, whatever it was that sort of helped you capture what the warrior in you was and represented, and what the healer in you. And I want you to now imagine the two meeting, your warrior and your healer meeting together and joining. learning from each other, working together, and see if you can integrate them into one whole. What does that feel like to have the warrior and the healer merge? Where in your body do you think they merge easily? Do they fit together? Where in your body is it more clunky? How does it feel like to imagine them merging? Where do you feel any particular sensations come up for you? Where are those sensations enjoyable, inspiring? And where are those sensations uncomfortable? What do you as a warrior and healer merged? What are you inspired to do, to think about? What are the dreams and the hopes of your warrior healer? And how do you already embody that in your life? And you can come back on that water bottles are a nice bell. Turn on your cameras. Right, so the rest of the time together will involve a combination of kind of thought, discussion, concepts around this notion, and some practice, some application. And really all of it points to that integration of the warrior and the healer, right? And we'll do it for different parts of ourselves, our emotional, our physical, our intellectual, our mental selves. So I want to start off by asking, how do you distinguish violence and the protective use of force? Are there any key distinctions between those two? And this is a question out to you. You can answer in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself.
First thing that comes to mind is the initiating violence or responding to the presentation of violence.
Sort of like is it responsive or is it proactive? The use of violence. Okay, and we have in the chat also, is there an intention to meet a need for safety? What's the intention behind the act? Tina writes, when there's hatred within the use of force, then that's violence. So when you can get rid of the hatred and the use of force, that's protective. Colleen writes, there's not a punishment element to it. The intent is to provide safety. It's not an element of wanting to hurt or focusing on hurting others. Pam wrote, it's the minimum force needed to stop or prevent harm, but never beyond that, never to actually to sort of punish or teach a lesson or humiliate. And Janie wrote, it's the difference can lie within this kind of the power over being violence, the power with being protective. Elizabeth, what would you like to add?
Something that takes away another person's need for safety.
So when you're almost like exchanging, building up one person's sense of safety and subtracting from another's. Tara?
Oh, yeah, the distinction I have about those two is the protective use of force is to serve life. Violence is not to serve life. It's life alienating, not life serving.
For that. And then there were two more comments that I noticed here. Protection has access to gentleness, regrouping, and play and friendliness. When acting out of boundary violation or overreacting from unhealed trauma. And from Tyrus, I'm guessing that's a question. Is the question whether that's violence or whether that's protective? Which I love that question because it really opens up what happens when our violence comes from a chain of violence, and what happens when it comes from a place that's not as much under our conscious control, right? It comes in an activation of our own fight and flight. And it's hard to speak of intention in those moments because the part of our brain that might hold conscious intention is offline. How do we distinguish violence and protective use of force then? And Reynald wrote, violence means caring only about winning, not caring about the consequences of the violent act. Yeah, particularly on the others. Yeah, so I think we've touched on many of the key elements within the distinction between the two. I want to talk a little bit more about them. So I do think while important, intention cannot be the sole distinction because intention sometimes when we're acting, we don't have access to intentional thinking, and yet we can still perpetrate violence. But intention is a very important element at times because it's the only thing that can really distinguish whether a given act that we observe from the outside has the desire to harm the other one or the desire to try to protect everyone. But certainly what seems important is that in and underneath the act that might be considered violence from an outside observer or that might be seen as protective, is that arises, the question of whether that arises from a sense of right and wrong, from a sense of othering, from a desire to control, right? Whether that's conscious or not. And I want to introduce this idea that perhaps violence and protective use of force don't exist as binaries, but rather exist as ends of a spectrum. So that we can, in one moment, both have part of us that deeply cares about the consequences of our actions on everyone, and part of us that is still socialized in wanting to punish or wanting to control a situation, wanting to take charge, that those two can live in us at the same time. That we can both be acting out of this definition of violence as well as the definition of protective use of force. So I think to summarize, violence comes from a place of disconnection. Right? Violence comes from a place where we are not connected to the creative power in us, the empathic way of being. We're not connected to the needs of others and possibly even ourselves. Because when we have a more, when we're really tightly connected to our needs, we recognize that violence itself as a strategy also violates some of our own needs. So in that sense, violence, while it serves or it attempts to serve our needs, may be coming from a place that's just less rooted, less grounded, less connected, both in ourselves and in those around us. Perhaps it's more impulsive, perhaps it's less thought through, perhaps it's more of a reaction, perhaps it's habitual. And that's how it might express itself. What are some examples, clear examples of violence? Ones you would say for you, there's no doubt that this is violence. There's nothing protective about this. Far end of that spectrum we talked about. Okay, so Rebecca writes, dropping bombs. I want to hear a few examples if you can think of them, and then maybe we can discuss it if there's some thoughts about them. Abusing animals. Sexual abuse, incarcerating immigrant children. Doge cuts, stopping US aid funding, controlling women, nixing others, genocide, death penalty. Yeah, so we can ask ourselves, are these examples here, are they showing that there is a kind of a clear disconnection, a clear disconnection from the humanity and the needs of others? Is there behind them a sense of wanting to take control in order to meet one's own need, to dominate instead of collaborate? Are they immersed or sunk in right and wrong thinking in such a way where the violence becomes justified, either as punishment or as necessary to get one's own needs met? Renee wrote, it seems to me that during these times, the idea of not seeing something as right or wrong feels like a liminal state, if you will, where we risk not acknowledging atrocities. Thoughts? So we've got this conversation happening on our thread here. Pam responds, I hear this. By holding the humanity of the people doing violence, we can stay more in protective use of force rather than dehumanizing, but using the judgment of wrong can help the people receiving the violence experience acknowledgement. Does this help your clarity? Okay, so what I think is happening here, and I welcome folks to bring their voices into this conversation, but if we try to move beyond the thinking of right and wrong, I'm wondering, Renee, if what you're saying here is that does it in a way equalize the acts and the reasoning of those who are perpetrating violence.
Yeah, thanks, Tarek. That's a good way to represent my thinking about it. It's a difficult concept for me, to be honest. There's just some things that I look at and I just think, that's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. So, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that into the space. I want to welcome that part of every one of us in these days that wants to scream from the rooftops, this is wrong, this is outrageous, this can't be done. Because that part of that voice is, pointing to some things that are incredibly important to us, but may not have a sense of power to do anything about it. Maybe the labeling it as wrong is the most powerful act we have, because it uses, the power of that dichotomy, the power of that binary, that moral binary. It uses it in a time when you may have very little other political, economic power to change things. So I want to acknowledge that's an important piece, and the moral, the moral binary is one that's used by social justice groups all the time as a way to try to gain a sense of power. Reinhard?
Yeah, I wanted to bring the most confusing example of the protective use of power, which comes from a book about psychopaths. And there's a story about Eskimos, about Inuit. I'm still using the old word. And it seems that they know this condition of psychopathy in the sense that there are occasionally people who never care about anybody else, who hurt others, who lie and do other things until at some point, sort of the community, or at least a number of relevant people, come to the conclusion, even though we've talked to this guy, we've reprimanded him, we've tried to help him, we've tried to heal him, but he doesn't stop. At which point there is kind of a decision, okay, we have to go on a hunting expedition to the edge of the ice, and then there will be a hunting accident. And that person doesn't come back. That is, I think, the most irritating example of the protective use of power, because it protects the community from the actions of that incorrigible person. I don't want to say that this is in any way the normal case of things, but you've been talking about extremities, and I think this is sort of the most extreme case I ever heard about.
And Reinhard, what is it that's irritating to you about that example of a protective use of force?
Well, because it completely cuts the connection with the guy who will then not return.
Yeah.
Because it cuts the connection in the way, it cuts the connection to the healer. It is sort of an acceptance that there is no way of healing this.
And maybe that is an acceptance you see as coming too early. Maybe there's more options to explore.
Well, as I read the story, it seems that these people have explored, and as far as I know, the Inuit are very good at, very tolerant of many things, but there is a limit.
Reinhard, you are touching on, in the sharing of your story, I hope other people are getting this, but you're touching at the core tension. And it's a place of unknown. I mean, I think it's a very uncomfortable place. It's a place where we don't know if the harm that the use of force, right, really does and is the best and protective way to move forward. And I think I want to take a moment to really like sink into that, because in the practice of nonviolence and nonviolent activism, and in the practice of living your daily lives, you'll likely land in this place of uncertainty. Now, this Inuit group, who I know nothing about, faces a particular choice they have to make. And it's a choice that's a complex one, right? Because this person probably takes up a considerable amount of resources, to put it in kind of material terms, but, energy and emotional capacity to make sure people are safe, to feel okay, to regulate themselves. And at some point, they make a choice whether they're going to go on a hunting expedition or not. And my guess is, they've developed this. Maybe it's a ritual of and how that choice is made. But each of us comes to a point where we make a choice whether to use force against, in ways against in ways that will hurt others. Perhaps it's not taking someone's life. We don't, and we are the ones that made the calculation, not them. And that in of itself is an act of power, right? And that's an uncomfortable place, and one that's riddled with the uncertainty of, could we have done something different? Is my thinking clear about this? Do I understand all of the needs? Have I done enough to tend to my own needs in other ways? Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that there is that space in when power and force or violence meets protective force, and where we find ourselves. And I mourn that it's not easier. It's not easier in those moments to know what to do, or to be sure that you made the decision that aligns with your own needs and those of others. Colleen?
I saw an interview with Jeffrey Dahmer, who was a man who would lure lovers back to his house and then kill them and eat them. And I had always kind of put him in the "you're dangerous, unforgivable" act. But when I saw the interview, he seemed a very gentle man, and he was like, I know I'm wrong, and I'm glad I'm being in prison where I can't do this anymore. I feel so driven. When they say they're going to leave me, I need to keep them in my body. I need to keep them with me. So I could see his need, and I could feel compassion for him. And he was killed. And at the same time, I would have protectively, if I was in an Inuit situation where we don't have prisons or somewhere to keep us all safe, I might have made the decision to kill him and still kept him in my heart. And that seems to me that's what makes it a protective use of force.
Thank you, Colleen. You've taken one of the most extreme examples and provided perspective. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm seeing a comment here. I think it's Tyrus. It says it takes a strong healer to find that limit. And then Quentin responded, and willing to be vulnerable. I really like that. I like that acknowledgement that to be able to find acknowledgement and peace and acceptance for your own limits, and knowing what to do, whether you've really hit the balance between protection for yourself and those you love and those around you. Yeah, and then Quentin, yeah. So let me do something here. This is very rich. Thank you, everyone. I'm enjoying the interactive nature of this. I want to ask all of us to tap into the part of us that has, and I'm going to refer now to the spectrum, the part of us that has sat on the the more violent end of that spectrum at some point in our lives. Okay, and I'm not going to ask you to share with anyone when and how and that shows up for you, but I will say that for sure I've been there. But what I want us to do is, when we've acted from that place, how did it feel? How did it feel before, during, and after the act of violence? And by this, violence can be anything from saying hurtful words, to making a decision unilaterally that had consequences on someone else. Doesn't need to be a physical harm necessarily. Does anyone want to share about the feeling, not about the act or anything like that? What was the feeling that came with expressing ourselves with violence? Pam.
So this is probably not exactly violence, but it felt like it at the time. So when COVID first started and we started having very strong limits about and weren't sure if we'll be able to go out at all. And I had to get some medicine for my husband, and I was getting enough to last for, at that time they were saying this should, be over in 6 weeks or whatever. And I felt desperate that I get this medicine for my husband, and I had a sore throat, and they were saying, if you have a sore throat or whatever, any kind of symptoms, do not come in. And I chose to expose everybody around me. I actually wasn't sick, but I chose to expose everybody around me because I was so desperate to get that medicine for my husband. Like, I just didn't let them care. I didn't let myself care about other people because it felt like there wasn't enough.
Yeah. So that sense, the desperation, the scarcity of the moment.
Exactly.
And do you remember what it felt like when you're you're knowing that you're kind of going forward, disregarding, these requirements or guidelines? Do you remember what it felt like in your body?
I don't know if I can think of bodily sensations, but I felt really uncomfortable. Like I felt like there was some moral injury happening inside of me.
Like to yourself?
Yeah. That I was making a choice that was outside of my own integrity, and yet on one level, and yet I was making the choice anyway. I mean, when I think about it now, I'm feeling really sad, because what I notice about it is that my own human limits will and have and do cause me to harm other people, because I just don't have the capacity sometimes if I feel in desperate straits. And I don't like that. I mean, I feel very sad about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. So yeah, I really want to sort of invite the grief that we may feel when we're not aligned to our own integrity. When we recognize we don't have the capacity to be there fully on the protective side, where the capacity to fully embrace others and their needs. When we do move ahead, desperate to get what we long for, in this case, to care for your husband during a very, very uncertain and destabilizing period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
John Paul.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so you told us to focus less on the event, more on the feeling. So I'll just say briefly, I'll just say something very general about the event that I recently encountered somebody who had experienced what I would call an egregious amount of neglect originating from some assault that had occurred some years ago, and to now characterize what the feelings are that I was experiencing just in being witness and listening to this person who was disclosing all of this to me. Wow, feeling disillusioned, feeling baffled, feeling hopeless, feeling worried, feeling a bit of despair, and then feeling some sort of low-grade resentment, I think. And you're asking, like, where in the body, and that's interesting because where I feel it most is it's difficult to do that, but I can do it, which is I think about my the chest plate that's above the in front, just under the skin, in front of the heart, underneath the chest plate, just sort of like a low-grade burning under there that feels persistent and unpleasant. And then all under the umbrella to some degree of sadness. But yeah, so that's I just wanted to share that. That's like it feels like a real visceral kind of experience, and I just want to say thank you. I realize I haven't had much of an avenue or a forum to be able to talk about that or express that. In my role, I was carrying a lot of that for the person that was giving me that information, but realizing what's happening on my end of the equation there. So anyway, I appreciate this moment to be able to share that, and thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Paul. We'll go to Sylvia. Hi, Sylvia.
Yeah, hi. I was just thinking that it's like before I cross the border, it's like a big feeling of helplessness and despair, and just coming to a limit, just like okay, I have to do something because otherwise I won't cope with it. And afterwards just feeling sorry and mourning and asking if there wouldn't have been a different solution. So, and also having to cope with what if I act violently, then it might follow a chain, so it's, and then yeah, so yeah, like the limit, and then like after having crossed the limit, the question, was it necessary? I couldn't have find a different solution. No.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. And what you said also resonates a bit with what Colleen wrote in the chat, kind of this range of emotion that comes forward, and it speaks to the dissonance we feel. I'm imagining of folks who really value acting out of love. Elizabeth.
I in an example where I exhibited violence over someone else, I was definitely feeling the need of control, of wanting to control their behavior.
Yeah. And that likely came from needs, right? What did the control get you of their behavior? That could have been, right, consideration, respect, safety. So we've been talking about violence. We've talked about kind of things that give rise to violence, right? The states of being, the forms of disconnection that we talk about in NVC that give rise to the violent sense of violence, the dehumanization, right-wrong thinking, the controlled deserve thinking, that people deserve what they get because of something that makes them less than worthy as humans. We've given examples. And I want us to remember just that all of this violence, as Marshall Rosenberg has said in one of his most celebrated quotes, are tragic expressions of unmet needs. So whether it's us who find ourselves in small or larger acts of violence, or even just in like desires for violence, what that is indicating is that there's some unmet need. And it's a tragic expression because in this world where we may feel so scarce and desperate, it's the one option that just seems most out there, most available, most promising. So let's hold ourselves with that consciousness, that our own sense of violence and that of others comes from unmet needs. Let's talk a little bit now about the protective use of force side of the spectrum. I want to, I think because of with time here, I'm gonna say a few things first, and then I want us to go through and try to find some clear examples as we did for violence. So I want to start with two quotes, also from Marshall Rosenberg. The first is, the intention behind the protective use of force is not to punish, but to protect, to prevent injury and injustice without passing judgment. And the second quote is, we can use power in a way that supports life, or we can use power in a way that diminishes life. The choice lies in whether we act from judgment or whether we act from the intention to meet needs. So for me, I would say that most maybe broadly the description that sort of most broadly captures the protective use of force is connection, right? Are we connected to ourselves? Are we connected to our own needs, including that integrity we desire to be living aligned with our needs for love and consideration and compassion? And are we connected to those of others, including the person that we're about to do something coercive to, right? So that, is there that consciousness, that care that comes out of connection? And there are a few hallmarks for me that help me, for myself, distinguish whether I'm really acting or how to act out of connection, how to act out of protective use of force. And some of these have already been mentioned. So one is only as much violence or force as needed to be able to address the harm, stop the harm, protect the person or people. Two, has there been as thorough as a consideration of all the options available as you can muster in that moment with that amount of time available to you? Of course, the tragedy in that is that sometimes we don't have the time to think through our options. Sometimes we are reacting in a split second. And when we do, we often need to react out of habits with incomplete information. And we may choose what's more violent or uses more force than is actually needed. But when there is time, we really can slow down and need to slow down if we desire to use the protective use of force. Number three, do we stop the protective use of force as soon as it no longer serves protection? Right? As soon as it's no longer required to stop the harm from happening, do we now go back maybe to those other options? Do we stop and do we reassess? And do we no longer use the force? And number four, as a hallmark of the protective use of force, is, are we, after the violence has occurred, and in this case I'm calling it violence, after the protective use of force has occurred, are we committed to restoration? So do we look and see what the harm that protective use of force has done? And do we try as best as we can to allow for healing and reconnection and reintegration? So I think those four things help us act out of the use of protective use of force, or show when the protective use of force is indeed where we're coming from. All right. Any questions about that before? And so I'm gonna ask you next about examples, clear examples of the protective use of force. So you can start thinking about that. But before I do that, any questions about the protective use of force? All right. So let's see if there are any examples. Ozka, I'm doing my best here. How'd I do?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, just a second. Just a quick question about the disconnection and protection. I'm just thinking, how do you see the role of narrative? Creating a narrative to our choice. I mean, what would be yeah, that's an extreme example, but it's very likely Russia might think that they are protecting life. They're protecting, Russian people or even Polish people. Like, I don't know, creating a narrative around it. I'm sure it's possible. Because narrative has such a strong power. This is, I think, one of the main things that distinguishes us from animals, that we create these crazy narratives, capitalism, patriarchy, money, all of it. And we structure life and organize life around narratives, and they work perfectly well. We can always argue. How do you see the place of narrative in this?
I love it. I love this prompt. Yeah, so what I would say, it's the creation of the narrative is in self part of the act of the violence if it meets all the criteria we've talked about as violence, right? So if we're creating the narrative out of a sense of disconnection of the needs of others, out of a desire to control others, out of a right-wrong dichotomy, the creation of the narrative is as much a part of the violence and possibly is the driver of mass violence, because it's that narrative, as you've noted, that makes it possible for people who have no idea about why we're engaging in a particular military offensive or any kind of mass coordinated violence. It's the narrative that makes it possible. So not just, it's not a side event. That creation of the narrative is one of the biggest parts of violence. Now, the question is, are you creating it, right? Are you creating it knowing that you are driving towards more violence than is needed to be able to protect? You are considering or not considering all the options available? Are you creating it in disconnection with the needs of everyone involved, right? Then the creator of the narrative is perpetrating the violence. Now, the folks who ingest the narrative and who act out of the narrative, now they may be believing a narrative that they didn't create and may be acting out of their sense of protective use of force. The soldier who's on the front line, who knows no better than to believe that they're protecting their people, they didn't create the narrative, but they believe the narrative and are acting on that narrative. So you can have in that same group, right? You can have some people who are acting in our definitions here and our distinctions, acting out violence, and some people who are acting using the protective use of force. Of course, this world is complex, and so a soldier on the front lines also, can have access to other narratives and to information, and may learn that information in the course of what they're doing. And so at some point, what may have started as a protective use of force, as they start to inhabit the front lines, and maybe they hear the narratives of the victims of the violence, they may then realize that they're caught in a narrative, at which point they're now wrestling between the orders they're given and perhaps their own sense of connection and their own integrity to their own values. Yeah, thanks for that. Any clear examples of the protective use of force that anyone would like to share? And it could be in your personal life. It could be something that you've seen in the news, or you've witnessed amongst others. But a use of force, in other words, force is typically something done without the consent of those receiving the force, impacted by the force, right? Renee.
I wanted to use the example that I had brought in about the judge, but I don't know if you want to use it for a different context.
I'd like to use it actually for a kind of an exercise.
Okay. We'll return to it then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tara.
Just a simple thing, like if a parent is seeing, for instance, their kid gonna run across the street and they see, car coming, they might yell at them and grab their arm hard and throw, pull them back out of the street, something like that.
Quentin.
I think that's an interesting question, and I think it's something that really gets worked out in practice, rather than sharing it as a story, unless there's some real skillfulness involved in that. Because when I have been involved in protection or any kind of use of force for my own self-protection or others, it doesn't go according to plan, and it doesn't go according to even what I've practiced. There is a sense of my body has inhabited or inculcated the principles, and my mind works from that through the body, and it is not clean. Principles remain throughout, and my mind is constantly reframing to work with the body in order to protect the space, the other person, or myself. So it's very tricky to give an example that can be like a story when involved in that hyper adrenal experience.
Yeah, thanks for that. What comes to mind is sort of a very heat of the moment incident where it's not like time is, you have the luxury of thinking through what to do and who's got what needs and how do I, right? Your body takes on the challenge of trying to protect and you have a sense of being guided by the principles of needs consciousness or whatever, but it's something that's happening in its own logic inside your body, right? Am I getting you?
I wouldn't necessarily say logic, at least not for me. I would say expression, the sense that I know the body is going to kind of blend together tension and expansion without the mind interfering with that. And the mind is going to have these moments where something may come out to organize the information, and then the body takes over.
And I'm taking from that there's a trust that you have in your body to be able to use the force protectively without you having to be thinking it through. Is that right?
Yes, it is. There's also an element of, it's an element of attentiveness, and blending together sometimes, again, opposing sensations. because part of the sensation of having to physically touch someone, or even the intention where I'm reaching out or having to create a different relationship with movement, is still, there's a sense of resistance. My fight flight nervous system is activated, and there are all these other things, but there's a threshold when you just kind of push it away to flow through what is needed. And yet, I wouldn't say I'm a Vulcan or something where I'm detached, and I don't believe I'm disassociated. Certainly, if I am I would be a spectrum. But to get back to that principle of just I'm protecting myself or this other person, not vengeance, not being inefficient with my energy and my awareness.
I'm finding this really fascinating. Thank you, Quentin, for raising it. I mean, you're framing things in ways I haven't thought about before. And in particular, what I'm finding very valuable is this idea that the nervous system and the way it responds in the proverbial flight, fight, freeze, sympathetic nervous response, autonomous nervous response. I'm liking this idea that that in itself is protective, like that we can have this relationship with our own biology, that we can trust our body is doing what it can to be protective, instead of seeing our nervous system as this wild, kind of trustable, right? Like it's the cerebral cortex that's our friend, and that holds keeps us aligned and in value, but actually also seeing that our our limbic system and our reptilian brain is also there and can act out of a protective use of force. I'm not sure that's totally what you meant, Quentin. I'm just telling you I like that realization. I like that idea that I can lean into a trust. And it's almost like I'm connecting to a part of me that I sometimes try to suppress because I'm scared of it. I'm scared of what it might do. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. Were you pausing for me to slightly?
Yeah, I'd love since I referenced you, please, if you want to respond anything before we move on. Yeah.
Yeah, and respectfully, I didn't expect the continuous dialogue, so I don't want to project into teaching with you or something like that. Just answering your question or sharing. I think like what you just did is bringing in all the elements. You're bringing in your cognitive, and then I would also sort of say to myself, how am I breathing with all of that expression? How does my body feel? But not to compartmentalize them, but to blend them together or to have relationship with them. And that there's a care of that. There's a care of that. So if I bring up the story that is harmful, do I also bring up in my body the story that's soothing and relaxing and not separate them? Bring them together as a part of what I really need, or even what that other person needs, in that situation. Because there's also an element of de-escalation with language. Even as my body is doing these other things, can I de-escalate by finding out, guessing that person's need, using my hand to almost soothe the space? What can I do? What can I do? And yet I'm also doing it for myself at the same time, calming myself down, soothing myself, and perhaps offering that person an opportunity to move closer, to that level of where what you said before about having that tragic need and judgment and non-judgment kind of come together. Have them all in the same room in a sense, and have them relate to each other and not choose.
Right. Thank you, Quentin. I loved your focus on the mind-body connection. I hope you're out there teaching more on this, and opening the space to think about those connections. Hilda, I had seen your hand up. I'm not sure if you retracted it, wanting to move on. Okay, and there's lots also in the comments that I'm catching up on here. What about putting sand in a bulldozer gas tank that is being used to tear up an old growth forest, right? What about assassinating Hitler? These questions of where are we when we're at the intersection or on that spectrum between protective use of force and violence. I guess I just want to I encourage you to have those conversations with others where there's more free time. I want to ask if anyone wants to just say what it feels like when you are very solidly in that sense of protective use of force. How does that feel? So in counterpoint to the feeling of acting from a place of violence. And Quentin helped, actually was part of also what Quentin shared. Anyone else want to add to that? There seems to be like a flow sometimes. Rebecca, is that your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. One of the examples that comes to mind is actually a very personal one. My mom fell and broke her hip last summer, and so she was in hospital and then in rehab. And I learned to advocate hard for her well-being and stand in front of somebody who's overworked and probably underpaid and insist that my mom's needs be nourished in a timely fashion. And I did that as kindly as I possibly could, and finding this balance between holding people accountable and cutting them a lot of slack. And it was an incredible experience of that warrior healer combination. And I'm wondering if protective use of force includes having those two energies working together in balance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Rebecca. All right, let's, we just have a couple minutes. I want to go back to this example, the scenario that Renee brought up. This was in the news the last couple of days, yesterday, I think. Renee, do you want to, can you give us a 1-minute recap on what happened?
Sure. Just I have limited information, but essentially there was a immigrant man who was in a judge's courtroom, and ICE showed up. I don't know if I have all the facts exactly right, so if anybody wants to clarify, I'm open to that. Showed up and wanted to basically detain him. And my understanding is that she took him and put him in her quarters as a way of protecting him from ICE. And what ended up happening is that apparently that was not legal for her to do that. That is, I think, yet what remains to be seen, how as this whole thing plays out through the system of the courts. And she was incarcerated. So that's as much of the story that I know.
Yeah, and what I would like to do is actually...
Well, thank you for identifying what ICE is for people who live elsewhere. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and what I'd like to do, Renee, is actually take it on a bit of a tangent from what you had written and ask, let's say you're in this courtroom, right? And immigration officers are coming in and headed towards this gentleman. And the judge isn't fighting the gentleman. And I want us to process that kind of situation together. In terms of what would you do? What force, if any, would you want to use, and how would you hold it with care?
Are you asking me to play the role of the judge?
No,
Just want to clarify. Oh,
I'm using this as a scenario, but then I'm stopping at where the judge did anything, and I'm putting each one of you into this courtroom as
got
people
it.
who are in the audience, right? In U.S. courtrooms, there are typically they're open to the public for most kinds of hearings. So you're there for whatever reason. You may or you may not. Let's say you know this. Let's say you're there because you know this gentleman, and you care about this person, and they will lose everything if they get deported, right? Their livelihood, they may even face persecution if they go back home. So I want to talk about what, in this particular scenario, how would we, if we would, how would we use force with care? So, and there's lots of comments coming up here. Margaret wrote, make a protective circle around the person and force ICE to stop or take us all to jail. Okay. Okay. So now that's a circle, that's multiple people. So then there's some steps that are needed before you you just spontaneously form a circle. Great. I mean, we're talking very strategy here. I love it. I love it. I'm actually going to be hopping off in 10 minutes because I'm rushing for a de-escalation and active bystander intervention training for a local group here in DC. So we're going to be acting out these kinds of situations. I would have hid them in my chambers for as long as it took to give the immigrant a chance to not be picked up by ICE, since ICE is unjustly detaining and deporting immigrants. Okay. To what degree would you use force? So we've heard obstruction or interposition, where you're putting your body in between you and the agents. We've heard, I mean, in one case, the judge was able to let the individual go to other parts of the building. Okay. Okay, Colleen noted, I guess in this particular case, that the individual had a history of domestic violence, but not sure about the quality of that information. Okay, and also Maud added that in this real life example, the migrant was then arrested. So the protection did not last very long. So when you think about this situation, I want us to go back to a number of things we've said. First of all, who are we protecting? Obviously the individual, but is there more? Whose needs are alive for us in this courtroom where we find ourselves?
Can I answer? At least for me, not just the needs of that individual, but the need in this society now for due process. If that can be called a need, a collective need for due, it's not. I think it's a strategy, right? Due process is a strategy to meet a need.
Yeah.
So I'd have to spend a little time dropping down into that.
Yeah. Probably something about fairness, probably something about consideration, mutuality.
Justice,
responsibility. Yeah. 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 Collaboration. Yeah. Well, what's ICE's need? Well, ICE is an entity made up of people, those agents, you know, just like the frontline soldiers we talked about. They likely have a narrative where what they're trying to do is safety, protection. And at the very least, it's feeding their families and maintaining a livelihood. Yeah. Yeah, and Rebecca, yeah, it's in these kinds of situation, it can be paralyzing to be faced with high pressure situations to try to figure out what you can do. Because really what's happening is in that courtroom, there's a larger drama that's playing itself out. You know, you're there for one small scene of a much larger picture. And the larger picture is enormous. None of us have access to the kind of power to change these large policy and historical developments. And yet acting out in that one moment might have great consequence for ourselves, but we don't really know what it is. And we don't know who else is going to be there with us. If we stand up and say, let's circle this guy, how many people will join us and circle up? And if it's you and the guy and you both get arrested, who did that help? Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe to start to wrap things up, I think I'll say this example shows some of the complexity. I think it shows, I hope we've like being able to slow down and it's like, what does it really mean to care for all and to be connected with ourselves and with others, right? How do we act out of that sense of connection? But I think it also says, you know, this is about being more proactive than waiting for the courtroom moment, right? So this is about figuring out who amongst us would be willing to stand up and circle around the guy in the courtroom, the immigrant. Who do we have to join and be part of some kind of movement? And when you have time and space and you have people, the protective use of force is much easier. When you're in a reactionary moment, that's when violence becomes seemingly the only option when we have that scarcity and desperation. So thank you everyone for your participation. We're going to do quite of an abrupt transition back to Shahar, who's going to talk about the gathering happening at the end of May in Cadiz. I'm going to stay on for a few minutes, so if you have any questions related to the programming and facilitation, let's hear those first, as I'll be one of the co-facilitators, co-trainers of that retreat. Thank you so much. I'm seeing the love being sent out on the chat. I return it to you. And Shahar, floor is yours.
Thank you, Tarek. So yeah, I will not say much now because Tarek has to leave. Does someone have a question about the content of the seminar directly to Tarek before I go on rambling about the seminar, about the convention?
Maybe it makes sense for me to say a few words about kind of what we have in mind for programming. We're really looking at this. It's not a typical NVC retreat or IIT or intensive where you kind of have various offerings every day. Some of it might be responsive to what people want, but they're kind of discrete, different sessions with session goals. We're trying to create an experience with an arc over the full week, and one that both involves learning, but this is leaning more into folks who already have a basis in NVC and more into how to integrate NVC into our own processing of what's happening, our own mobilization, both in ourselves and in our groups to be more effective, to be more alive, to be more connected, and our mobilization in the world around us to make changes that we want to. So we have a strong social change theme going on. We have social change fellows who have been selected specifically because of the work they're doing all around the world. And we have our sessions are going to be sequenced and kind of connected, building up over that week. So that the participants coming in leave not just with more NVC knowledge and skills, but actually leave more oriented and more attuned to any social change work that they want to be doing. And we hold that very broadly, what social change work means.
And how do we find more information about the details of registration and all that?
I'm posting the link in the chat now.
Oh, thank you.
Tarek, I think we let you go.
Right. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Hey.
Thank you so much. And yeah, stay with me. I'm gonna take a really short break, water in, water out, and then I'll tell you a bit of things about our time in Spain. So let's take 2 minutes now. Thank you, Tarek. Bye. Bye, Reinhard. Of course, you're welcome to stay also if you're just curious. You don't have to stay if yeah, I'm here.
I know it's interesting, but I definitely won't be in Spain.
Yeah, I know
I
you
stay
heard it
part-time
also a
now.
few times before.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Okay, you're welcome to slowly come back to us. Wow, so many have stayed. That means there is some curiosity in the room. I also see some faces of people that will take part that I recognize. This part is very informal. Feel free to leave when you feel like it. This is just about curiosity, and I will start by saying that yeah, this topic that Tarek has now shared about and all this curiosity that came up. Yeah, this is not fitting in a 2-hour session, and we'll have a whole week to explore this topic and other topics. Also, on top of just being with each other and connecting and experiencing nature and conversation and nice food in Spain, where I can let my jacket at home. It's gonna be pleasantly warm. And this is a very special time for NVC Rising because we're coming from the screens into a face-to-face meeting. And the center where we meet is actually, we chose it for many reasons. One of them is because it's very much also doing the nonviolence work that we wish to see more in the world. It's doing already in the way it's built, in the way it's working with the earth in the way it's designed, and from the building to the food to the workers. So we're super happy to be hosted there. And yeah, we're gonna be, I would say, a relatively intimate group. There's maximum of 60 to 70 beds in the place. So that's how the group size will be, something like this. And that's amazing because it means more intimacy, more option to connect. And yeah, our days will be, in a way, they will start and end in a similar way, but also in between there's much room for different topics and different sessions that will come up. I don't want to go into too much details before I kind of hear what you're interested to know about. As the time is limited, we have about 7 minutes. Yeah, so what do you want to hear about before I talk about everything? Any specific topics? Something that you're curious about?
I won't be able to attend, sadly, but I am so rooting for this. And if I remember correctly, there was a matching grant, and I'm wondering if all the people that you were hoping to, I don't know the right word, subsidize their attendance from Palestine, I think, and maybe also Israel. I can't remember, but I remember just being so hopeful that that the financing would work out so that those people that you so desperately wanted to attend would be able to. Is that working?
Yes, so far, I mean, there's still a little gap of some money that's missing, but we are doing quite good. And yeah, indeed, activists from Israel and Palestine and other countries in the world will join us as we planned. We are very grateful for the support of everyone who donated and made this possible.
Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to hear that that's progressing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing to make that whole thing happen.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for everyone who donated. Also in here, there are some. I don't want to mention names because I think it's a private thing, but I'll give you 1 minute to think on topics you're curious about the convention, and then I will talk about things that come up for me. Okay, I'll say a bit what comes to me. I don't know if any of you have attended an IIT. It's an international intensive training on nonviolent communication. They happen like in various countries in the world. And this is not an IIT. But what the quality is, I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm guessing we will have this quality, is this, I'm more like resting with each other in connection, and from there just being inspired, being inspired, like coming back home and feeling this, wow, we've met so much in ourselves and outside, and inspired to use this and to bring this more into our lives. I remember one of my IIT, I think I was crying every day, and not from a bad place, like also sad emotions, but from a connected place, just recognizing the power of nonviolent communication, and it's social change, and it's therapy, and it's activism, and it's like touching on so many points in my being, in our being. And yes, I have so many friends till today from IITs or from NVC trainings I took 15 years ago. So it's a very deep connection that we will meet there with each other. And I also noticed that for me, social change or anything that I want to manifest in the world requires this inside motivation, requires this fire. And for that, I also need people. I cannot do it by myself. And whether you're interested in changing something on the world or not, you probably might want to do that after being together for 7 days, because it's just the natural way of that's my experience. And especially when I was with Israelis and Palestinians, I grew up in Israel. Being with Palestinians and sharing the space, it's such a gift to meet someone who would normally be my enemy, and meet in a space of nonviolence and start to see each other, to connect beyond the stories we have about each other. And also, we as humans, we have so many stories about each other. We don't have to be in war. And I just love this place where we connect beyond the stories. And like I said before, like rest with each other, just deeply rest and nourish ourselves. Beyond all the technical information, I could tell you this is actually what I choose to share with you now. And the logistical. Yeah. And the last minute or 2 minutes we have with each other, does someone want to say something about that, or ask a question around that?
This is Tara from San Diego. I just want to say, no question or anything. I just want to say how full my heart is about, being with people like you all. I've been doing this. I've been passionate about NVC since 1991. And so when I see like spirited, hearted others, this is the world I want to live in. And I just feel a lot of gratitude and inspired and touched. So I want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. It's always sad for me to end this kind of sessions. I have the feeling we can just stay like this for a long time together. Yeah, come to Spain, or next year if you cannot this year. Yeah, if you still have things lingering in you, questions or things, just write us an email. If you're curious about the convention, in the chat you can find the link. And yeah, if someone wants to ask me something personal, I'm here for another few minutes, but otherwise I will just officially close. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hilde, it's so sad you're not coming.
I know you would come if you can. I know.
Yes, I'm sad I'm not coming, and I'm just really happy for you, and I was very relieved and happy to hear that you. I hope hopefully you're going to get all those people together that you so wanted to have there with you. And
Yeah.
one of our home group mates might join you, so I'm keeping fingers crossed for that.
Wonderful.
And I love the idea of next year.
I'm not sure it will take place in Spain, but let's see. Yeah.
And thank you so much for today's session. So nourishing. So thank you.
Sylvia, I have a feeling I know who you are.
Yes, 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 yes. I started to answer the email. I didn't finish, but I could make it for today. So I said, okay, I'll drop in and yeah.
Okay, nice to meet
Yeah.
beyond the words.
Yeah. Yeah, still a bit struggling with like the parts in me that want and yeah, like it's not so easy being on a desert island. No, it's a bit difficult and work and yeah, everything. So yeah, I'll answer with, but I'm really
No
grateful.
rush, no pressure. Let those parts in you struggle, and when they come to peace, then you can write. Hello.
Yeah.
I do have a question about is now okay the time to ask?
Yeah.
Just I saw a call for teaching assistants and I'm just curious about that and just specifics about attending.
From what I hear, you have experience with NVC, the background. I think we might have like maybe one more spot left in that role. Because I think now someone is kind of has to cancel or something like this. I don't know. If you are curious, or if you want to know more details, it should happen soon. I can tell you. Yeah, maybe you have an email of Goni.
Yeah. Do you want me to just put it in the chat or give it to Oh, I see. Contact this person.
Yes, and yeah, just maybe to put yourself on the radar. First,
Yeah.
just say hi. I'm Tara. I'm considering blah blah blah, and so we have it in mind, and she can catch up the conversation with you.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. Okay. Great. Yeah, I do have a lot of experience. I worked with Marshall, in 1991, 92. I got, what was, I guess, the equivalent then of certification. And I taught for, 8 years.
You learned with Marshall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, come. We want you to be with us.
Well, I want to be there. I really do. It's just so I'm so passionate for this work. I want the world to have this work. So I'm so glad we're here.
You live in the States?
I live in San Diego, California. Yeah.
San Diego. Okay. We have, I think, around 3 people flying in from the States, one from Canada. Yeah.
Yeah, we were the San Diego NVC coordinating team for Marshall's visits back then. Before the book came out, we were the editors of the book. And so I have
Wow.
like drafts for the book. And so, yeah, we go way back, some of us. And I mean, I remember when there were just 20 of us, at his workshops, and
Wow.
but I do remember like being on the floor at his feet, holding on to his one leg for dear life, thinking, "Oh my God, this is so big."
Mhm. Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, if you come, you can share with us more stories from this martial time. It's like I always love to hear stories
Yeah, I
from
know
this
just what you mean.
early time of nonviolent communication. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't go back to the 60s with him, but I go back to the like 1990. So
Okay,
yeah.
that's good already.
All right. Well, thank you. I will follow up on that. Thanks again. Bye now.
Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
A nice sky in Freiburg.
Well, it's a bit cold, but yes,
Yeah.
it is beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, bye bye.
Bye bye, Sylvie. I will end the meeting. See you.